The next session is one that we get a lot of questions about, Clinical Trials 101. Dawn Richards is the Director of Patient and Public Engagement for Clinical Trials Ontario. Dawn has a PhD in analytical chemistry, and it was her own diagnosis with rheumatoid arthritis 15 years ago that started her journey to combine her passion for science with making the most of her diagnosis. Tonight, Dawn will be interviewing Trish Osborne from Palgrave, Ontario, and Joanne Lyndsay from Toronto, Ontario. Both are Teal sisters living with ovarian cancer who have firsthand experience as clinical trial participants. As well, we'll be joined by Dr. Alison Ross, Director of Disease Information and Education here at Ovarian Cancer Canada. So Dawn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. And it's really my pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. I'm also really pleased to hear where the OVCAN initiative has come. I had the pleasure of helping out in the early days of OVCAN with some of the patient engagement activities. So I'm so thrilled to see the success that's been achieved with that today. So just a brief introduction to add to what Stephanie graciously provided already. As she mentioned, I'm the Director of Patient and Public Engagement at Clinical Trials Ontario, or CTO. And what CTO is an organization that's primarily funded by the Government of Ontario, basically to help Ontario become a better place to do clinical trials. And we do that three ways. One is to help streamline the processes, to help people do clinical trials, basically set them up faster and really get them up going so that people can participate in them, but they're still ethical and of high quality. We help promote Ontario as a place to do clinical trials. And then I do work like this, which is helping engage patients and the public with clinical trials, either on clinical trial teams, like you just heard about with Alicia, or as sessions like this, where I sit down with people who have participated in clinical trials, and we try and bring knowledge to a greater audience so that you can make the best decision for yourself around potentially participating in a trial or simply learning more about what the options are. So that's a bit about me and the organization that I'm here on behalf of today. And I'm really honored to be here with Trish Osborne and Joanne Lyndsay, again, who have participated in clinical trials, and they've graciously allowed for me to interview them, and they'll be sharing some of their experiences, and hopefully I can add some context onto their experiences as well. We'd also invite you to either type questions in the chat or the Q&A. We can see if we can answer those as we go along, and if not, we'll make sure that we've got a bit of time at the end of the session before we wrap up to try and answer your questions as best as we can. So I'm going to ask both Joanne and Trish to say a few words about themselves and also share what you're comfortable with about the clinical trials that you've each participated in. So maybe I'll pass it over to you first, Joanne, and then Trish, I'll ask you to add on next to that. So go ahead, Joanne.
Thanks so much, Dawn. It's so nice to be here with you. My name is Joanne, and I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in February of last year, 2021. And I have low-grade serous carcinoma. I started in a clinical trial after surgery in April last year. I was in a clinical trial that was looking at the standard of care for low grade, which was chemo, 6 rounds of chemo followed by letrozole or letrozole itself. And I was randomized to the stream to do chemo first. And so I did 6 rounds of chemotherapy, and unfortunately, it really affected me. And I had a tough time with very many side effects of chemo, and needed a lot of support in that. So at the end of that, my doctor, who was the principal investigator, the PI in this clinical trial out of Princess Margaret Hospital, deemed me unfit to continue because I was just, I had many issues going on. So I was dropped from the clinical trial, and then I did start on the next stage, letrozole, 4 or 5 months later. So I will always wonder if that delay has caused any problems for me, but that is something that we will never know about. I was, I'd be happy to go into a clinical trial again if there was one that I would be eligible for. Let me pass it over to Trish.
Thanks a lot, Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Dawn. I was diagnosed with high-grade ovarian cancer in March of 2019. I went on to doing chemo. I had the tumor taken out and everything, and I started my chemo right away. The month May I started my chemo, and I ended up starting right away on the trial too. So my trial was Bev and Durva. Extremely long names, so I just used the short form of them.
That's fine. Yeah.
And I started that. I did the 1 round of chemo, and then they started me in on the trial right away. Now, the trial took me a lot longer than I expected. I finished my chemo, the 6 rounds, and then I didn't finish my trial until September of 2021. So it is a long time, but I've always said it's so well worth it to me. There was some side effects, probably not as much as maybe you, Joanne. I do have blood pressure and I have thyroid problems now, but I've always said I'm 6 feet above, not 6 feet under. So I look at that as a good thing. So if that's the little bit that I have, I'll take it. I find myself tired a lot in my bones. I find it's probably the job I do now. So my bones, I found, have changed a lot. And I don't know if that's chemo, if that's the trial. And yeah, I can't say enough about the trial, and I can't say enough about Princess Margaret. So.
Okay, thanks a lot to you both for sharing that. Joanne, we've already got a question in the Q&A, and I think it kind of makes sense if you're up for answering it. It was, so you left the clinical trial because of your physician's concerns about it, and you still would consider being in another clinical trial if you were eligible. Are you able to share your thought process around that for the group?
I think clinical trials are really important in healthcare research. In fact, I know they are. I'm certainly happy to participate because I know that we've gotten to where we're at with treatments because of other people volunteering to be part of clinical trials. So I guess in some way I consider it to be part of my social responsibility. And the other part of it, and one of the reasons why I was happy to enroll in the clinical trial in the beginning, was that it would allow me to be monitored more closely. So I know that meant there would be more appointments and more tests, and I'm not sure what else, but it made me think that I would get better care because I was monitored more closely. And that was very valuable to me. So it was worth having extra appointments. And fortunately for me, I live not very far from Princess Margaret, so it was not onerous at all to go to extra appointments. and have extra, for example, have extra CT scans compared to what the regular standard of care would be. And for me, that was a real bonus of being part of a clinical trial. I felt well looked after because of it. I feel well looked after even without it, but I'm not monitored quite so much, which, you know, as Trish says, it's better than some of the alternatives. So you learn to live with that and work with it.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. And Trish, I saw you nodding your head a lot when Joanne was talking about, feeling like she was monitored more closely and those sorts of things. Would you like to add to that as well?
Yeah, I feel very much of that. Like, I actually have a CT scan coming up at the end of this month. It's every 3 months. It's an hour and a half, a day off work. And then I go on the Thursday, and then that Monday I go see the clinical trial, the team that I kind of call as my second family, under Dr. LaRue, and my nurse and that. And they're amazing. Any problems you have, you email, they're on to you. That they don't even email you back, they'll phone you back. So I definitely say that with Joanne too, that it was well monitored during that whole time of even the 2 years while I was on it. I had a special phone,
Okay.
and I had to actually, update everything. It was a survey. So I had a survey that I had to do and constantly hand that in when I would come in and write everything down. Everything was recorded. Everything was like to the T. Even if I had a headache, it had to be recorded. If I felt a little bone pain, it had to be. I had ended up getting some sores on my gums and that. It was a trip into Princess Margaret. To me, it's well worth it. Like, it's so well worth it, the trial. And Joanne said she would live closer. I didn't, but thank God with my husband and that he would take the time off, and you worked as a team, and that's what gets you through.
Okay. So another interesting question has come up that I think, we would probably explore as well, but maybe I can add a little bit of context. This person has asked if you were worried about being part of the placebo or control group, and that possibly having a negative impact on your health by not getting treatment. So I just would like to chime in that, Joanne, it sounds like you were probably in a phase 3 study because there was a standard of care and you were in a randomized study, which is usually a phase 3 type study. I think something that I would just like to bring attention to with the audience is that when there is a standard of care for a disease area, it's not ethical for people to be offered placebo. So the comparator would be standard of care versus the new therapy. And that's something that a research ethics board would look at when they would review the protocol for a clinical trial. If that is a concern for people, that's definitely something that you should ask the study team about. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. But did either of you have concerns about that or ask about that when you were discussing the potential to be in a study with your oncologist?
I did talk with my oncologist about that, and I was reassured that it was the standard of care was chemo for 6 rounds followed by letrozole, and the trial was looking at whether the chemo could be dropped and people should just go directly onto letrozole. So I when I was randomized to have chemo, in some way, I was a little bit relieved,
Okay.
which, when in retrospect, I think is ridiculous, but because that was the standard of care, but it caused me a great deal of problems. I might have been better off without chemo. The kind of cancer I had, low grade serous, it it's known to not respond well to chemotherapy.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think I might have felt like I was not doing something that maybe I should have if I had not gone on chemotherapy. So, you know, it's hard to know. I mean, we can't go back in time and test that hypothesis about whether I'd be better off. But anyway, I'm on letrozole now, and I'm tolerating it fairly well. So I'm not discontent in any way.
Okay. Trish, did you want to add anything? No.
I wasn't too worried if it was a placebo or not. I think a lot of this has a lot to do with your mindset too, going into it.
Okay.
When I was told that I had cancer, I just assumed they're going to take it out and away I go. You know, I had a trip booked. So a month later, but no, it was Dr. Bouchard, who was my surgeon, said, really think you should try this trial.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked over and I signed the paperwork. Like, I mean, the paper is thick, and the nurse is like, are you sure you don't want to take this home and read it? And I'm like, nope. My doctor says it's good. It's good. Like, I guess I just put the faith in Princess Margaret just because what they stand for and the trial. And you know, I know they're not just going to give it to you. You have to want it, which I did, but you also have to have certain criteria. I do know. And obviously I did.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So you met the criteria for a study, and your
Yep.
oncologist thought you were probably open to that discussion. Yep. You had the discussion, and you made your decision based on a lot of faith in them and their knowledge. Joanne, yep. What was it like for you? I think you also said that your oncologist approached you about participation.
I was trying to remember, Dawn, that
okay.
I think that even before I had surgery, my oncologist said that I might be qualified or eligible, or I think eligible is the term she used for a clinical criteria. Trial. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so as I was leaving the hospital, one of the doctors said, "Oh, we want you to take this drug when you leave, and take it every day." And then she came back and said, "Oh no, we don't, because you might go in this clinical trial." So what she was offering me at that time was the letrozole. Not what, if I'd started that, it would have made me ineligible for the clinical trial. So I waited until they had done the the medical and biological workup to see what stage I was at and all this. And then I spoke again with my oncologist, with the research coordinator. They both spent quite a bit of time with me and whoever was with me in my appointment. They did give me a whole bunch of papers to read, and I did take them home and I did read through them. But I do other work in healthcare, and I have a great deal of faith in research ethics boards and clinical trials, and I know that all of that has happened in the background. And I didn't sign immediately, but I really had no hesitations at all to get involved. The clinical trial did kind of find me because my doctor, my oncologist, was the principal investigator. So that's probably not the experience that everybody has, but I had no hesitation in signing up for it, and I was offered all possible opportunities to learn more about it, to ask questions about everything. I remember at one point even asking my doctor, would she recommend this to somebody in her family, and she said, if you were my sister, I would recommend you do this. So that was kind of the final I don't know, like that made it clear that yes, I would do this for sure. So
Okay, that's really helpful. And I guess what you've both been talking about in quite a bit of detail, it partially is the process of informed consent. And you both went about it in very different ways to make such a personal decision. One piece is signing that big form, right? Which is, all the things that are expected of you, potential benefits and risks that are known, who you contact if you have issues, all those types of things. And then you further delineated on this, Joanne, and you have too, Trish, that you ask questions along the way. So informed consent isn't just you sign a document, off you go in the study, but it is about asking questions along the way and making sure that you're still comfortable with being in the study, you're still comfortable with what's expected, the site visits, all of those things. And it is important for people to also know that, if at any time you feel like you need to stop and withdraw from this study, that is possible. I mean, that happened to you, Joanne, on the recommendation of your oncologist. And sometimes people have to undergo tests or, specific, it might be a scan or it might be a blood test, et cetera. And that's generally to make sure it's safe for them to leave the study in the state that they're in at the time. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. And then you both also talked about the study kind of found you because your oncologist approached you about it and realized that you met the so-called criteria to be in the study. And in oncology, that is often the case, that people are approached to participate in studies. In some other areas, people they might be treated by a family physician who's just not as knowledgeable about the space, et cetera. So they might, look at a database like clinicaltrials.gov to find a study, or they might approach an organization like Ovarian Cancer Canada. So there are different ways to get into studies. You both had a very specific experience, but I just wanted to let the audience know about that. And another thing that people are asking, I'm noticing in the chat, is knowing whether you should be in a clinical trial or not. And I think that, again, is part of a personal decision if you feel that's something you'd like to explore, or if maybe your physician has come to you about that. But there's not really any, specific time that is the right time sort of thing. But we have touched on here that depending on the study, you do have to meet specific criteria to be in it. Like you said, Joanne, your oncologist kept you off of a specific medication so that you would be eligible for the study, et cetera. So there's lots of little nuances about things that are important for people to know about. So another thing I just wanted to go back to, and you both didn't have major concerns about participating. And sometimes people do get concerned about the safety aspect of studies. So I don't know if there's anything that you haven't already shared that you wanted to share with people about who might be concerned about safety, in addition to asking lots of questions about things. Any comments that either of you have about the safety aspect at all that you'd like to share?
I wasn't concerned about safety. I was on the clinical standard. I was randomized into the clinical standard. So I think if I had not been if I had not gone on chemo and gone right on the letrozole, I think I might have always thought, I wonder if I should have been on the chemo. So that didn't happen. So safety was never a concern for me because I was on the gold standard at that time.
Okay.
But yeah. I think Trish was a little different.
Well, no, I never felt unsafe or anything. There were some just side effects, but that's side effects on anything. And like I said, the team I had and the whole team there were very, very, very professional, very caring, and just considerate. Like any time I was in, it was, I like to go in the first thing in the morning because I could get in there before the traffic and then get out of the city before the traffic. And they accommodate it, They had the parking, and we submitted our parking, and there was, fun that helped us. We didn't have to you paid for your parking up front, but then you got reimbursed on that. But I've always said I'm 6 feet above. Thanks
Right.
to them.
One thing, Trish, you also mentioned about was that you were surprised that the clinical trial took as long as it did. So I wonder if you wanted to comment a little bit more about that, and if you continue to have follow-up visits at all. And then I'm going to pass it over to Joanne to just comment as well. If you would have remained in the study, if you could share a bit about how much longer you would have been in the study.
Yeah, thanks. I was supposed to finish in June of May or June of 2021. And when I ranked, no, it was, May of something like that. And I was supposed to finish then, but then they asked if I would stay a bit longer to do, they thought it would only be like 36 treatments, but it ended up being like 42. And of course you miss certain ones too, because of your blood work and everything. So it was longer than I expected. But I was okay once, my husband and I talked, and I was a little angry at first because they didn't prepare me enough, I guess. But once I talked to my nurse and we got things, she explained everything to me, then I was like, yep, no problem. And I stayed on it. It's to help, unfortunately, future patients. I wouldn't want to see me go through the whole trial, and now I can help another woman.
Right.
That's my biggest thing on this trial, is now they're able to take whatever I have and run with that and learn from that. So
Okay. Joanne?
And I think, I'm sorry, Dawn, I really can't remember, but
That's totally okay.
The letrozole, I think I understood at that, when I was signing up for the clinical trial, that this is a drug I would take every day for the rest of my life. So for some reason, it pops into my head that it was like 3 years that I happened to be the first Canadian registered in the trial. So it was really just the very beginning of the trial. And for some reason, I think it was going to go on for the monitoring was going to go on potentially for up to 3 years, but I might be wrong on that.
Okay.
So the difference for me is that now the standard of care is to have CT scans every 6 months instead of every 3 months. But it turns out I had a CT scan that showed them something of concern. So now I'm actually on a 3-month schedule. So, and I think that will fluctuate depending on what they find.
Right.
So again, I don't feel that I do feel that I have excellent care. I don't feel anything is missing from the care that I am getting.
Yep. So it's been interesting too, talking with both of you. You talk about, for you, it's been important to participate, not just because this might help yourself potentially, but you've also talked about helping other women. You've talked about the fact that it helps to contribute to the evidence that, ultimately helps potentially change healthcare or, changes how decisions are made. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that about why you feel that trials are important, or why or how you feel they help either you or other people?
Well, I do know that trials are important. They're looking at clinical care guidelines, and those are guidelines that that all doctors are supposed to use. Sometimes they don't, but it's something that that medical practitioners of all sorts should pay attention to. And so, that's important. I mean, to continue to understand, I know that low grade serous carcinoma is not, it's not so common as other types of ovarian cancer. And for me, I think that means that there's less research done about it.
Right.
So this is a project that looks specifically at low-grade cancer, and I felt like I didn't feel like I had an obligation. I felt like I wanted to contribute to it, to the research that would maybe help me, but it would definitely help other people along that were diagnosed after me. So I guess it's like, I just sort of, I see it as a part of my own sense of social responsibility that it's a good thing to do. And it's good for our community of Teal sisters, for example.
Awesome. Thanks, Joanne. Trish, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much, how many ovarian cancer stages they are. I was high grade, carsa, I can never say the long word. It was the two what you had, Joanne, but I was high grade. So
serous carcinoma?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I had no idea that there was different stages. I didn't realize, I had no knowledge of it. But to me, it was probably one of the best things that happened to me, because it has changed me so much, and it has made me aware of, women, and to advocate for that now, to advocate for research, and to advocate for trials, and to advocate for, to understand. Women need to understand the different symptoms and everything of ovarian cancer, because I was like stage 3, if not stage 4. So yeah, it's
okay. And another thing, I'm watching the chat, there's a lot of commentary about myths about clinical trials. So some people see clinical trials as like the last ditch effort. And I'm certainly not hearing that from either of you. And so what would you like to say to combat that? And also, what other myths would you like to bust about clinical trials, given that, Joanne, I know that you work in clinical trials in another area as a professional. And so maybe you can draw on some of that as well.
Yes, so I do work in HIV research, but not specifically in clinical trials.
Okay.
It's slightly, but I'm very aware of all the clinical trials that do go on in HIV research, and how important they have been in establishing new and very innovative medications for maintenance, that people take drugs every day for the rest of their lives, but the side effects are minimized by the newer treatments. And so clinical trials are ongoing in HIV. There is no cure for HIV. Then many researchers are looking into that part of it as well. But clinical trials have developed and continue to develop very innovative treatment regimes for that health condition. So when I thought about a clinical trial in ovarian cancer, I immediately think this is, we're working towards better options for people in treatment. And, it's again, not a cure, but it's it's treatments that will have potentially fewer side effects. And I know in the trial that I was in, I had enormous side effects from chemotherapy, but I haven't had any from letrozole. So if that becomes the new gold standard, I could understand. Then I would have been better off in that, because I'm still feeling effects, some of the side effects of neuropathy, for example. So I'm a strong advocate for clinical trials, and I believe I will talk to my oncologist about options for joining another clinical trial in the future. I don't know if that will be a possibility, because I'm not, I'm not really familiar with all the different kind of research in ovarian cancer, but I'll certainly be talking with my healthcare team about that.
Okay. Trish, did you want to add anything about, you said you weren't really very familiar with clinical trials in the first place. So did you have preconceived notions or thoughts about them beforehand? Or even, when you've talked to people about participating, have they said anything about that?
No, I wasn't worried about it. I did meet one woman that we call it chemo daycare. And she was offered the clinical trial, but she turned it down because of driving. And I advocated to her saying, it's to me, it's so well worth it. It's so well worth it. I agree with Joanne. Like if it wasn't for us, 100 years from now, we may only be taking a few pills, for maintenance and stuff like that. The chemo kicks the living crap out of you. But I found with my pills, I didn't have that many side effects.
Okay.
Oh.
So another thing that you've both talked about is the fact that, Joanne, you live fairly close to the site where you participated. So that was like pretty convenient for you. Trish, you said you didn't, but you formed a team with your hubby and you guys decided this is what you were going to do. Is there anything that's important to share with people about that, about, some of the aspects of participation, or did you have to pay for anything out of pocket, or did the trial cover anything? Those types of things that might be helpful for people to know about.
I think I could have, I ended up taking a taxi often, but it was like often less than like $10 or less. So so I didn't end up putting any claims in, but I think I could have. And then sometimes I would walk home from my appointment. So that would have, that if you live far away and you have to pay parking rates, I'm sure the parking rates in the hospitals downtown Toronto are pretty high. So I can certainly understand that. I don't know if they also paid mileage for travel, but I understand that once you're in a clinical trial, they pay for everything. So if there are drugs that you have to take, you get it for free. So for me, I'm over 65. So I basically get the letrozole for like, $4 for each prescription that I pick up. So so I don't know how much it would cost regularly.
Otherwise, you didn't have to out yourself, by the way, Joanne, but I appreciate that you did.
Yes.
Like I said before, that we paid for our parking up front, but then you submit it and we got to check back afterwards. And
Okay.
it was like I would pack up, snacks and lunches, and because it was a whole day affair. When I was doing chemo and the trial, it was 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
You're there a long time. So you make sure that you pack for that. And I mean, chemo daycare, they have microwaves and water and stuff like that. And no, I never looked at it as
like a burden or anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yep. And so that's just something important people should think about. There's a comment in the chat about what's provided and, what you might have to give up, or your time or whatever is important for people to ask about. The other thing too, that we sometimes get questions about is understanding the credibility of studies. And, a red flag would be being asked to pay for the study treatment, or being asked to pay like a participation fee or an entry fee type of thing. So those are things you should ask questions about if you are asked about that, but you should have a good sense of, the time commitment, what it may cost. And I know living in the GTA, if I drive downtown at midnight, it's going to take me 20 minutes. And if I drive there in rush hour, it could take me up to an hour or longer. So those are things that Trish, you said you plan for in terms of like going early, getting home before rush hour, all those types of things. So that's those are important things I just wanted to make sure that people understood about. I see another question about being treated at smaller centers versus larger centers, and if there's any kind of concerns there. I think you were both treated at a large center downtown, so that might not be something you can answer, but I think it's important to know that the care you receive as part of the trial would be the same across all centers, that what people are doing to adhere to the study and make sure that the science is credible would be the same no matter what center you're at. We also had a question about participating in a trial that's not close to you. And so I can share that I do know individuals who have, for example, participated in studies in the US. Sometimes the National Institutes of Health there will cover all of your expenses to fly there and participate in studies and stay, but that's not always the case. I've known people who participate in those studies, and then they've also paid out of pocket to participate in studies in the US as well. So those are just really things that you should ask when you're considering being in a study and seeing how that might impact you. So I really want to thank both Joanne and Trish for sharing so much tonight. Before we close, I'm just going to ask both of you if you would just like to share anything else with the group that we haven't had a chance to talk about, that you wanted to leave them with in terms of your experiences or things you want them to consider if they're thinking about clinical trials. And then we'll wrap our part of the session up.
Okay, well, maybe I'll go first, Trish. I do think that it's important for people to consider clinical trials and to, once you have a disease that has some, that doesn't have a cure and has ongoing research, it's good to start to get to know some of that research. I know it can be difficult if you don't have a medical or biological or background, but you can start by asking questions of your healthcare providers, and I've it's not just the doctors you need to talk to, but also the nurses. They have a lot of information, and I know at Princess Margaret they also have a library that you can access some of the materials. So it's it's important to be your own advocate within your healthcare, and so it really helps to ask questions and learn as much as possible about the disease that you have. I know that one of the first things that I did was to join a couple of Facebook support groups for ovarian cancer, and sometimes I just it just is overwhelming to read some of the things in there. Right. So sometimes I just kind of don't look there, but I have learned some things from some of the people there, and that's been helpful in my progress with learning about my own ovarian cancer and what it means to me. So I would encourage everybody to become to improve your health literacy about your own health care, and you might find that you actually get better care when you understand it better.
Thanks, Joanne. Those are wise words. Trish?
To me, I just want to say thank you to, getting cancer. I guess people always shake their head at me, but it really has opened my eyes to a whole different world, and a world I'm now want to advocate more for research, trials, and ovarian cancer. Like I want teal to be the #1 color, not the other ones. Not that they're not important, but this has hit us, and I have three boys too, so and a grandson, and they're all behind me. So it's something that I'm testing the waters with, and want to like I said, I can't thank enough for Princess Margaret and for that team. And reading about it, I have joined, like Joanne said, different Facebook pages, but a lot of it's in the States, so it's different.
Mhm.
But having the ovarian Canada cancer and some of this stuff tonight that I didn't know about. So to me, this is a learning night for me too. It's wonderful. I can't say thank you enough to all of you. So
Awesome. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Joanne. It's been my privilege to spend the last 45 minutes with you. And thanks to the audience for all of the amazing questions. And I'm going to wrap up and pass back to Ovarian Cancer Canada. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dawn, for facilitating the discussion.
Thank you so much to Dawn, Trish, and Joanne for sharing all of those insights with us. And I'm just going to be here for just about 2 minutes just to make sure that everyone's aware of a new tool that we have available. It's a self-advocacy tool. So I just want to talk about that just very briefly. So a key pillar of our strategic plan is to improve care for those diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So to do so, we're developing a whole group of tools that are going to enable people living with ovarian cancer to make informed decisions about their care and just to ensure that they receive quality, relevant information in a timely manner. So that said, the first tool we've developed this year, and we're so excited to share with you this evening, is our clinical trials tool. So I've seen some conversation in the chat about this, but just to make sure we're all aware, the Every Woman Study Canadian edition taught us that very few women from across Canada with ovarian cancer remember being provided with information about clinical trials, and then even fewer participated in clinical trials. And we also learned, as the conversation showed us, there's just so many commonly held misconceptions and myths about clinical trials. So these were extremely important findings, as we know that clinical trials can connect people with new and emerging treatments for ovarian cancer, and they're so essential for medical advancements. So therefore, we've developed resourcing to help clarify these myths and misconceptions that are commonly held, and to provide information to those who want to learn more about clinical trials and to maybe find a trial that's right for them. So the first part of this resource is what we're calling a Talk to Your Doctor card. And I'm going to show this to you in just a moment. So this is a printable card, or you can download it to a cell phone, and people can take it with them to their doctor, and it can facilitate a conversation about clinical trials. So it offers a brief definition of clinical trials, some important facts, and then it outlines some important questions you could ask your doctor. And then there's also space for you to take notes. And then to support this Talk to Your Doctor card, we've also launched a new page on our website, so ovariancancer.org/clinical trials, and I'll show this to you in a second as well. And here there's just so much more in-depth information about clinical trials. All of the information has been divided into 4 sections. So clinical trials, the basics, finding a clinical trial, deciding if a clinical trial is right for you, and participating in a clinical trial. So that all said, I want to just say 2 big thank yous. One is to Dr. Dawn Richards at Clinical Trials Ontario, who we just heard from. So Dawn shared with me a CTO's toolkit for organizations like ours to help us communicate high quality information about clinical trials to our community. So a lot of the information that we used in the development of our resources was informed by Dawn's work. So just a huge thank you to Dawn. And really, so most importantly, we want to thank our outstanding patient advisory committee that advised on the development of this tool, just to ensure that everything that we're sharing with our community are informed by patient expertise and insights. So we had a really fabulous group of 8 women with ovarian cancer. So in no particular order, I'd like to thank our fantastic committee members for their time, their dedication, their knowledge, everything. So Julie Pauling, Julie Mulligan, Livia Uy, Patty Pitts, Donna Pepin, Peggy Pickett, Erin Baird, and Martha Hoyt. So I'm just going to share my screen in just a second so that you can actually see where these clinical trial tools live on our website, and then I will stop talking and we can move on. So here is my screen, and as you'll see at the top, this is ovariancanada.org/clinical trials. And here is where all that information lives about clinical trials. So you can click on each of these to drop down to learn more. And a lot of the questions that came up tonight in the conversation are covered on this page. And then here is where the Talk to Your Doctor card lives. So you can click on this. You can see the card. So some facts, some questions you might want to ask, and some areas to take notes. So you could print that off and take it to your doctor and hopefully have a really good and meaningful conversation about clinical trials. So that's all for me, and I'm just going to pass it back so we can move on to the next session. And I just so you know, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. So if anyone has any questions about the information available in the tools, you can contact me directly and I can help support you through all that. So take care and thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Allison, for sharing that amazing tool that you've created. And I also just want to say, wow, that was an amazing and powerful session. Thank you so much, Trish and Joanne, for sharing your experiences with us. I know from reading in the chat that everyone here appreciates it as much as we do. Dawn, thank you too for sharing your expertise and being with us tonight, and answering some very common questions and myths surrounding clinical trials.